All right. So now we're going to look at system config XML. Okay. So this involves that system configuration view. So obviously in system config scope or system configuration, we have these different scopes. So an option can be tied to a website or to a store. Store being the most specific and the highest priority setting. Okay, so how would that happen? Obviously, we could set, depending on how these fields are configured, we can change the scope and set values. And those are stored, and we looked at the storage of that in the database. It simply stores an XPath and a particular scope identifier in the database. So now we're looking at this page. So this is how you can actually read the different areas on this page. So, and this is how this is structured in XML, because we just aren't done with XML yet. But this will be the last of it for this class. At a high priority, you have, or I'm sorry, a high level in the structure, you have tabs. Tabs do absolutely nothing. They're just really a container for different sections. Now, I said container, but tabs and sections are at the same level in the XML structure. So a section will actually have to refer to a tab in order to end up under it. And then, from then on, we do nest everything else inside. So inside of a section node, we would have groups. And inside the groups, we declare our fields. And that's it. This is a great slide. This is the structure here. So you see under config in system XML, you have tabs. And then you also have, adjacent to tabs, you have sections. But then inside sections, you have groups. And inside groups, you have fields. So this container structure is big in Magento Admin. All right, so similar thinking and some of the same syntax here. So tabs, you would simply declare a node, and we can call translate in the module to use, and we specify a label here, not a title, a label. Or actually, no, that was also label in menu, I think. Was it label in menu? Title. It was title. It was title in menu. It's label in here. Module means the module that will be used for translation. Basically, the helper that will be used to translate this node. So this is an actual node name. So if we don't have a helper set up, in fact, if you do this in your module and you declare your module to handle the translation function, and you don't have a helper in your module, you'll throw a fatal error because the class won't be defined. Yes, that's just simply how this was implemented. So tabs, and then a node, catalog in this case, specify a label, sort order. And then adjacent to that, we could have a section. So sections, catalog, section. So this would be catalog section. And we can specify a CSS class and a label to be displayed. And then here is where we associate this section with this tab. So that would make this display under that catalog tab. And we specify a front-end type of text, which would be used to render this value. And a sort order, and then these three values. And if they aren't, if one of these isn't specified, it's determined to be false. So, show in default, that would be the global scope. Show in website, and show in store. Your choice.
And showing means enabling the functionality to say
Basically, right. So you'd see, for example, in the admin, so when we want to enable path hints, that one is set show in default false. So that's why we have to change to a website or a store scope in order to show those. Okay, so the big thing to remember are tabs and sections are next to each other. Sections aren't inside tabs. Then groups, however, are inside sections. So inside our section, catalog, for example, we could declare a group. And here we're declaring another node, in this case front end. And again, we'll set front end type of text to render this value to the screen. Again, sort order and where to show. So these are the panels, the blue bars on the right when you click on a section. And then inside groups, we would define fields. So sections contain groups, groups contain fields. And that kind of makes sense. It's represented on the screen. As you click on that section over on the left side, you see the blue bars. Those are groups. You expand that. Those groups contain these fields. And again, we have a label, but here we have a front-end type. So this, we would actually specify. This would actually specify a select box. Okay. And then we're specifying a source model. Adminhtml system config source catalog list mode. Okay, so what this tells me is that the options for this select box are coming from this class. That's what the source models do. And sort order, show in default, show in website, show in store. There are also some other nodes that we can define here, and I define those in my in the file that I will be pasting for you. So, any questions so far? It's probably cruel to feed you this much XML right after lunch. So, what does all this do? Well, this sets up our system configuration page, and this provides the fields that we can then save. And the values that are saved here consider the scope and are saved in core config data. So that's the full connection there. So in the database, core config data, I have defined here a default scope and a scope ID of 0. So default scope will always have scope ID 0. Does anyone know why we have to have a scope and a scope ID? Huh? Related principle, but no. So basically, we can have website IDs and we have store IDs, and they might actually happen to be the same number. So if I have a website ID of 1, if we only had scope ID, we wouldn't know whether that was for website 1 or store 1. So that's why. So then the cool thing is this is the path, all right? So web unsecure base URL. Okay, this is an XPath.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is what I've been talking about with when we save things in system configuration and they go into core config data. Whatever, if we have a similar XPath in our files, then we're fine until until the same path is saved in a scope, in a given scope in core config data. So, for example, web unsecure base URL. I believe that's set. I don't know if that's set or not. I think that is. I'll see if I can find an example of this. Yeah, okay. Oh, here we go. Well, here's a good one. So, under the default node in config, default, so that would be a scope. We have general, locale, and code. So you see the XPath of, in this default scope, general, locale, code, and general, locale, time zone. So here we have the same values. General, locale, code in the default scope, general, locale, time zone in the default scope. So they're in the config.xml that ships with Magento, app etc config, that is defined. But as part of the install process, you set these values. And once they're set here, they will always override the base values. Okay. So fetching a variable from the system configuration. We did that on the very first day. Yeah. Mage get store config or mage get config. Mage. Yes.
Yeah.
Get node. Yes. Adding an option to the system configuration. Well, we'll be doing this in just a second. So, create an option in the system configuration and output the option value in a form. Well, okay. That's what system XML does. So, create an option in system configuration. And this second part we'll be taken care of in the next lesson. So create two module-related options in the backend system. All right, configuration. One is a text field, and the other as a select control with custom source model. Okay, what would that look like? Well, let's take a look. We'll have our third and final XML file for this class, and that will be system XML. And you're welcome. Obviously, we're inside a config node because that's just simply what you have inside of config XML, system XML, and Adminhtml XML config nodes. Then we have tabs. So here what we're doing is we're going to add tab to the system configuration, and then we're going to create one item under that tab, which is a section, and this will be our animal section. So we'll have a training tab and an animal section. And when we click on animal section, we'll see a blue bar that says general settings. And when we expand that blue bar, we'll have our fields. And that's the structure. So let's take a look at that. All right, so here we have general, catalog, find, customers, sales, services, advanced. Okay. Now, if I refresh, sweet. Helper data. Oh, why did that happen? Because, well, no, actually, that's the thing. I don't have to specify ACL for this. But what is happening is I'm calling translate using my module. And honestly, you know, it's very easy to set this up, so you should. So what I would need to do would be go into training animal and create a helper folder. And in here I would need a new PHP file named data.php. That's it. If I don't have my class group set up in my config XML, then I will have the same issue. Looks like that might be the case. So, in my config XML, yep, I only have models. Well, I'll probably need to go ahead and set up blocks and helpers too. Cool.
Oh, because we could bring out the.
All right, so folks, in your system XML now, I'm sorry, your admin HTML. Actually, we do this first. Well, yeah, because we actually have a little more work. But let's actually discuss. Well, let me give you a class. Let's connect this silly example with real world. So this would be if you have some sort of overarching global configuration, maybe whether your module is active or not, or some main parameter for your module. This is the kind of thing you would put in here. And if you have very simple administrative configuration needs, I would recommend just to use config system. Let's take a look at system XML and its effects. So, on the one hand, we have on the one hand we have tabs. Okay? So, tabs. And here's the tab, training. So that's what tabs does. And here you see animal. And in here, we associate this node, which we've also named training, with that tab up here. So we have to use this value here, in here, to associate, to put our section under that tab. And then for animal inside groups, we define our label for this particular panel. So each panel will be a node directly under groups. So general, and that's what's here, general settings. And in here, we've declared a couple of fields. Now, we only are showing one right now. And the reason for that, is, okay, I have two fields showing here. I have a recommendation, and then I have display recommendation. Now here, I have a dependency declared. And I just simply have it refer to this node. So basically, this node here, under dependency, refers to this node. So there we go. That has to be equal to 1 in order for us to show. Because of this dependency here, well, okay, that's just some JavaScript. Now, you can see when I mouse over this, I get this nice little tooltip that pops up. And up here I don't have enough screen real estate for this to show. Normally this renders to the right. So that's your little pop-up tooltip. And once I set that to 1, I get to see my recommendation field. And I already happen to have a value in there from my database.
So you select show, right?
Yep, so once I choose show, and
Okay, this is the thumbnail.
yes, and show is equal to 1. I do believe it's just whatever that value is.
So where does eat them all?
I already had this entry in the database. So if I wanted to find this, where this was saved, I can simply look in core config data for that value. And here I can see I've saved it. And you can see, now, here's the other thing to note. How does that path establish? Well, you see training general recommendation. Well, let's see. Training general recommendation. That's how that works. So you always have that 3. It's very cool. And then I can just do mage get store config and pass in training general recommendation. And I would get my config value.